I am being watched. Welcome everyone to Male Fuzz TV. I am Peter, and today I'm going to be talking about Person of Interest, Season 3, Episode 19. It's called Most Likely To. So spoilers for the episode. Been a little bit of a gap because of Christmas and a couple other things. January was hectic. But we're back, and we're towards the end of the season. We've only got a few episodes left of Season 3, so I was excited to get back in. I actually watched this episode way back when I first intended of recording this review back in December, and then obviously some time passed, and I've watched it again, obviously, to talk about it. And going back to it, because I'm almost happy in a way that I watched this one twice just to try and settle my thoughts on it a little bit, because I'm actually like, I think it's a good episode, but I don't think it's an amazing episode. I think I came out feeling a little bit mixed on it, and I still kind of feel that way. And it's not that there's not great things in it, and there's exciting plot developments, and where the ending leaves us off for what we're going to be doing for the last few episodes of the season is pretty exciting. I mean, one of the things that I've been saying this season, in fact, I mean, season 3 has been fantastic, right? I have been praising like season 3 is. I think at this point, unless the ending completely shits the bed, it is the best season of the show up until this point, based on how strongly I felt about a lot of the episodes this season. There was a run in the middle of the season that has been unmatched in the show. But the one maybe lukewarm element of the season that I've brought up a few times is just how little I feel for Vigilance as a group. They've just not felt like a big deal. They've always kind of feel like C-tier villains and whatever. Arguably, this episode does its solid attempt of really trying to make them feel like they're dangerous now. In fact, they kill the initial person of interest in the opening like 2-3 minutes of the show to kind of sell that, hey, not only are they dangerous, but they're dangerous in a way they're specifically targeting what our team do. They're trying to make it impossible for our own team machine, to actually save the people, and that's actually maybe the most malicious thing that they could do as a group of villains. So I do appreciate that. I think that was a good step forward. But I think my mixed feelings on this episode mostly just come down to the main story, that being the high school reunion that Shaw and Reese go to, and that's their main case of the episode. I think because we have to do so much time with the more important stuff, which is building the more season-long plot and the other plots with Finch and Fusco, a little bit of Root, of course, I think those things feel like they're a big deal. But it does mean there's less time to develop the main story, and I think the biggest hindrance that comes out of that is that I think the main guest star of this episode, the character of Matthew, who's the person of interest once the story gets going proper, the initial person of interest, of course, like I said, dies at the opening, which is a really good scene, actually, the way it's just like, no, that's it, it was a quick bombing, and she's gone, and everyone feels the defeat of that. And I mean, Shaw even says, are we being punished because we failed to save her? And it leads to a joke about Fusco riding in the car with Finch, and Finch having to listen to AC/DC or the Dixie Chicks, which was an amusing little line. But once they're on their main case and they're going to this high school reunion, I almost said Richard there, because this is Richard from Lost, and all honestly, that might have even been a slight part of the hindrance for me in this episode, is that all I can see when I look at this man is Richard from Lost, especially since his big thing on that show was that he was much older than he actually was. And you know, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much of Lost, but there was maybe kind of like hints and some theorizing that he was really old, like he was unnaturally old and immortal maybe. So it's like, okay, he's at a high school reunion. He's meant to be 20 years high school reunion, which would put him around 38, right? Unless my math is wrong, most people are around 17 or 18 when they finish high school. So he should be about 38 years old. I was having a hard time swallowing that, for one. And even Reese feels like he's a bit too old for this reunion. At the very least, though, they do point out, I think it actually is Matthew/Richard. I'm probably going to call him Richard if I'm honest, because he's Richard from Lost. But even he points out at one point that Shaw looks a bit too young to be here, that she looks 10 years younger than everyone else, and she does. So I'm glad at least they acknowledged that and said, hey, you look a bit young for this reunion, but here you are, going there. But I think it really is just a case of The entire plot revolving around this character and what's going on at the reunion feels a little like undercooked. Like it's I don't want to say it's convoluted because it's not that much to wrap your head around, right? There was like this girl who died on prom night back when they were in high school, and some characters have always kind of blamed Richard from Lost for doing this, that he maybe made the girlfriend OD on these pills, and they blame him for her death. And then in the end, it turns out it was actually her best friend who was kind of attracted to her and wanted to be the boyfriend who gave her pills, and unintentionally it led to her death. But he kind of framed it so that it would always look like the boyfriend had done it and that he had never even seen her that night. And it turns out that the person of interest, Richard from Lost, is actually the perpetrator of the story, because he's actually planning on getting revenge, because he's figured out, now that he's a prosecutor and he's looked at the case again, he's figured out that the best friend character from school, her best friend, was lately the one who killed her, and because of that wants vengeance. So there's a lot going on there. And when this revelation comes out and they have this standoff in the chemistry lab, it kind of like neatly sort of exposed, I think, what my problem a little bit with this episode is that this standoff happens and it feels a little bit rushed, because I don't really feel like especially since they're trying to play throughout the episode that Shaw might actually like this guy a little bit. There is a genuine attraction to him. And physically, sure, yeah, he's a handsome dude, whatever. But in terms of like her kind of sympathizing with him, it felt a little bit undercooked to me. Especially since he is actually trying to murder this man. Now, admittedly, there is like a throwaway line when things go down afterwards where he kind of just quickly admits, you're right, I could never have shot him, I was putting on a big game, but I could never have pulled the trigger. And that felt almost, again, just a little undercooked to me. It was like, oh, we have to just tell the audience that it's okay to sympathize with him a little bit because he would never have went through with it. But it just feels a little undercooked on that side. But what I was meaning when I said that this scene's kind of emblematic of how this episode works to me is that it feels that we rush through some of this main plot, some of which is fun, don't get me wrong, there's some funny elements, like the running gag that the persona that Reese is taking over, because both Shaw and Reese are pretending to be people who went to this high school. The running gag with Reese where random attractive women come up and slap him because whoever he's pretending to be was a complete womanizer in high school is quite funny, right? You almost start to anticipate him getting slapped at various points, and that's pretty amusing. Like, there's good stuff here. There's entertainment to be had. But the actual plot feels a bit undercooked. In particular, the character and the sympathy towards the character feels a little undercooked to me. And when this showdown's all going off and he's revealing what he's trying to do, and Reese and Shaw come in to stop it, and it's like, oh shit, you two know what's going on here. What's going on? Immediately, Vigilance starts shooting at them through the chemistry lab windows, right? And they're in this kind of like hunkered down survival mode. And it ends with a fun little bit where Shaw mixes some chemicals together to make a flashbang so Reese can take out the last Vigilance member. And it's an entertaining enough little scene. But it does kind of, to me, feel like how the rest of the episode feels to me, which is that we've got a main plot, but maybe the episode shouldn't have, like, a normal main plot. Like, maybe it was a mistake to try and shoehorn in a regular person of interest into this episode. And the main characters even feel that way. At the start of the episode, when Finch is sending Reese and Shaw off in this mission, he even says to them, hey, we've got a person of interest, you're going here whilst I go with Fusco to go and look into this other thing. This woman who was originally murdered, we're going to go look into what she's about in Washington, D.C. And the two characters are like, wait, what? Why have we been sent off to another number? We want to like figure out what Vigilance is doing. We want to like get revenge because they took this person from us. They made us fail. They're frustrated that they get shoved off into just a normal episode plot. And I think I, in a small way, kind of felt that way as well. Where, not so much that I'm mad that they're being sent off to do it, because it's entertaining to see them have to do all this like high school reunion stuff, but more just that it's kind of taking time away from what's more interesting right now. And I think the fact that we have the big showdown of what the main plot in this episode is supposed to be get immediately interrupted by the other stuff that is more interesting right now. And it's not so much that I don't think you can do that like in totality. And I think this show actually has done it multiple times where it'll have like main overarching story elements interrupt and get in the way of what the main plots are supposed to be, or make the main plot kind of tie into what's going on overall. The show's done that numerous times, and I think that's why this sticks out as feeling a little bit less like tidy to me, is because the show has been so good at it up until this point that this one felt a little bit, just a little bit disjointed, where I didn't quite feel that they meshed together that well as much as this show often does. And I think especially since I'm just starting to feel like Vigilance is a real threat as opposed to just this like C-tier thing that pops up occasionally. You know, at this point, I'm like, yeah, the episode probably should have been devoted more towards that and just really focused on that entirely, rather than trying to shoehorn in a regular plot. And the regular plot, while fun for most of its runtime, I think the resolution to the regular plot this episode does just feel very quick to me and really just undercooked, like I said, where none of the actual character beats of the main character lands. I didn't really care about him proving how the high school girl died back in the day. And I didn't really give that much of a fuss when he has like a goodbye to Shaw where he says he's going to go make a statement, but maybe they can meet up later. And she kind of smiles as she walks away. Like, I mean, that I didn't think quite hit for me. And I think that's something that this show, and again, it's because this show is usually so good at handling this stuff that it sticks out when it doesn't work for me, because normally I'm impressed with how this show makes me care about the guest star and makes me care about how it affects one of our main characters. Here I didn't feel it as much. Here it felt a little bit like it could have used some more time, and maybe that's a case of not mixing it with the other main plot stuff we're doing in this episode. And by main plot in that case, I mean the overarching Vigilance, Northern Lights, what Control's doing, all that stuff. I did really like, though, when Fusco's at the crime scene at the start for the woman who's been killed, Root just showing up with her FBI badge and just Fusco being frustrated and being like, oh no, not you. Wait, you've got an FBI badge? No. That attitude, like, forgive the phrasing, but one of my new running things in this show is Root just playing with Fusco. Like she's playing with her food. And Fusco is just so frustrated because he knows he's being played with and he can't do anything about it and he's scared of her. I like it a lot. It's so entertaining. But yeah, the meat of this episode really is the stuff that he does with Finch, where they go off to try and investigate who this woman was, why she was important to Vigilance. And ultimately she was like she was basically just like an administrative person, but she happened to be the administrative person for the government, and particularly all the people who have access to the machine, or the information the machine gives them at the very least, because they don't really have access to the machine itself anymore. The machine itself took care of that. But they basically want access to whoever knows about this program, whoever uses this information, because Vigilance's whole thing is about exposing the government spying on everyone and stopping that kind of thing. So that's what they're getting into. The FBI are looking into it, and this also freaks out a senator who knows about it. The dude from The Wire, whose name I can't remember. Let me just find. Garrison's his name in the show, but it's John Doman who's the actor. But he was in The Wire. I've seen him in a few other things as well, but that's the main thing I know him from. But he comes to Control and throws a bit of a fit about like this, compromising everything, and that this woman's death could lead to a lot of bad things. It sets up early in the episode that, hey, it's a big deal if the people ever find out that we're doing this. This is a big problem. And even criticizes Control for like not knowing where the machine is. Like the fact that the machine's not even physically something they can access anymore is also kind of worrying to them. But the information they still get is very important. So obviously there's a lot of big outcomes of that. The big one here, of course, is that when Fusco and Finch do their whole little like heist to try and get into the evidence that the FBI took from this woman's office, Fusco's able to crack the safe, but Vigilance also show up. And they did build to this quite well, because Root's on like the phone to like Shaw and then says, oh, I need to go, Harold's about to be in trouble. So they kind of did a neat little thing where they set up that there was danger going to the other plot. Because from a structural point of view, we'd kind of left Finch and Fusco for a while at that point in the episode. We'd had some funny stuff where they were sharing a big hotel room together and just, some of the odd couple relationship type fun we can get up to with them. But the outcome of all this, though, is that Collier from Vigilance does get the documents, does get the information from Finch, They have a little bit of a ethical debate as well, actually, where Collier acknowledges, like, he's figured out a few things. He's figured out that, okay, you work with two ex-operatives and an NYPD detective. You're not part of the government, but you are protecting whatever this system is. And Finch, of course, sticks up for the system to some degree. It is interesting, maybe, the actual ethical debate about the machine even existing, because that's always been an underlying thing in the show. To have characters that are actually going to poke at that debate a bit more, it is quite good, potentially, depending on if we get a chance to really have a conversation with them again. I think this meeting of minds between Finch and Collier could be something we expand upon, assuming that he lives long enough for that debate to happen. Collier, that is, because just because he's one of the villains and we're getting towards the end of the season, he very well could be dead in a few episodes' time, just based on TV show logic. But I do think there's some interesting stuff there. However, the outcome of all this, though, is that Vigilance do leak a bunch of the information they get, including funding for Northern Lights, and try to expose everything. We see it kind of from the machine's perspective, as we're seeing in the news reports. We see the senator denying everything and saying, no, there's no such program. I've never heard of Northern Lights, blah, 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 blah. He's spinning, he's doing all the things. But the big outcome of it is that he goes to Control and says that they have to shut this down. Now, of course, they don't mean shut down the machine, because I don't believe they have that ability anymore. The machine is somewhere they don't know. But the program that they run that takes this information and then puts operatives onto it to stop these bad things from happening, that's just shut down. Control's not happy about it, and she basically threatens the senator, but he threatens her back and says, hey, you're the one that will need protection if this gets out. Shut this down now. And we see kind of the result of this. So in the moment, I was like, oh man, like, they're shutting down the program. What does that mean for all the relevant numbers? But we do actually get kind of an answer to that at the end of the episode, where Root is talking to Finch, and Finch is saying that he has to hang around DC because Vigilance are up to all this stuff. And all of a sudden, Root just stops moving and talking. She's clearly listening to something the machine is saying. And we see from the machine's perspective, it rerouting all of the relevant numbers to her. Like, now Root is the one who has to deal with all the serious threats. And the final line she has of the episode is, oh, my plate just got full, or my dance card just got full, I think was the line. Which is fine, because it's kind of like a neat callback to all the high school reunion stuff. There was a lot of dancing involved, so it was kind of like a thematic, bring back for the end of the episode. Interesting, because I definitely thought in that moment where we saw the machine rerouting the relevant numbers, I thought, oh no, that's what the final few episodes of this season are going to be. Team Machine's going to have to stop some real threats, not just the personal ones, but they're going to have to stop the big relevant things that are at least local to the New York area or something. Like that's what I felt like it was about to do. And then the implication seems to be that no, just Root's going to go and deal with that stuff in the background. So I'm curious to see. I feel like the team might have to get involved in an actual big thing for the last few episodes, would be my guess. But that is exciting. It's different. Again, it's shaking up what the show does. It feels like a new direction to go in here for the last little bit. And there's obviously, I've glossed over a couple of things. Like, there's a whole the build up to Vigilance attacking at the reunion. There was a guy named Phil who was clearly just like Shaw and Reese, where he clearly wasn't one of the students. Because there's like a stoner character who says, "Hey, I don't remember you, Phil," and it's just kind of like, and he just sort of jokes about, "Oh, I barely remember myself sometimes," but he's clearly like there as like a bad guy of some kind, pretending to be one of them, just like our main characters are, and it leads to Reese figuring it out, and they have a big fight in the kitchen, and they're throwing Sloppy Joe tins at each other. I didn't know Sloppy Joe stuff came in a tin. I guess it makes sense, but Sloppy Joes aren't really a thing here, so I got a chuckle all the same. Do you know what? If I can critique, if there's one thing this show sometimes does that's a little bit cheesy, and it varies to degrees. Like, sometimes it's like a little bit cheesy, but it's just right, and then sometimes it feels like it's a bit too far and it didn't quite work. It's when they want a little one-liner before the ad break, they'll do like a cheesy line to sum up where the plot is. And there was one in this episode that made me laugh because it was pretty rough, which is early on in the reunion plot. there's like like photographs of the dead girl from the night of her death appear at the bowling alley, because it's like a 2-night thing where they're at a bowling alley the first night, and these photos show up, and it upsets Richard from Lost, and he gets up and leaves. And the line before the ad break is Shaw says, "A night to remember just became a night for vengeance," or something to that effect. And I was like, oh god, that was such a bad line. And I kind of love it, but it's such a bad line. So sometimes they do quite well with their little things, but every so often there'll be like one of those little, just like, oh, we want like a cool line of dialogue to go to the ad break on, to like hook the audience to coming back afterwards. And it sticks out so much, especially now that everyone watching it is watching it without ads, right? Like that, like almost no one is watching this with ads. And even if you are watching it in some platform that does have ads inserted, it's probably not all at the same parts that originally had ads, because we're not watching on network TV anymore. So just it really sticks out as like, oh, that's your little end of act quote before we go to the ads. But hey, that's a minor quibble. I do think the episode's a bit more mixed for me overall, because I do think the main story with the high school reunion, well, it has some fun comedy for Shaw and Reese and them reacting to stuff, like Shaw reacting to the woman she's playing, Betty. Like, she sees the high school photo of who she's supposed to be, and it's this, you know, really nerdy girl with curly hair, glasses, and big braces and all that, and she's like, "Finch, this is what you think I look like?" That stuff was entertaining. That stuff is funny. Her getting mad and Finch saying, "Well, you take away all these other elements like the hair and the glasses and all that, and the computer thought, yeah, you look like..." And Shaw's like, "Shut up, Finch, stop talking." That stuff's entertaining. That stuff is amusing, and the general sort of like back and forth with the characters is as solid as it ever has been. It's really just the guest character story feeling a little bit rushed in this episode for me. And the big dramatic points that it tries to hit later in the episode fall a bit flat because of that. But what it's actually done with the machine by the end of the episode and the overall ongoing plot is quite interesting. I do think the relevant numbers not being taken care of by the government anymore, and now Root and possibly our team maybe in the future will have to deal with them themselves for a little bit, is an exciting place to go into the last little stretch of the season on. So I am very curious to see where we go with that. But that is my overall thoughts on this person of interest. Apologies once again for the big gap between episodes. The plan for now is that at worst it'll be every other week, and it'll alternate with X-Files. If I can do both in the same week and get them both going weekly, I absolutely will. But at worst they'll be alternating for a little while. But that is this episode of Person of Interest. So thank you very much for joining me. Do let me know what you thought of this episode in the comments. You can like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. And of course, you can, help with the content and support it and keep it all coming over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I do appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?